Okay, for the first time, I'm kind of going to do a little 2-for-1 here. This is a pretty recent film, which you can see behind me, Wolfman. Now, it seems like, I don't know, seems like there is always a werewolf film going on. I mean, we have classic films like, say, from the 80s, like Howling, or is The Howling even the 70s? I don't even remember, but like American Werewolf in London, Then we have that Wolf film starring Jack Nicholson, Silver Bullet, also from the 80s. I think there was a Wolfman film like a decade ago. I think it had Anthony Hopkins in it or something like that. It's weird that we just keep going back to this. And something tells me that this script was probably left over from... some of you might remember this, but remember when Universal Studios, they were going to do this thing called a dark universe, and that they were going to reintroduce all their Universal monsters. They were going to put them in a connected universe, kind of like a style of the MCU. And this was going to be a big thing. But then they put out the first film, The Mummy with Tom Cruise, and it was such a gosh darn flop that eventually they basically called it off right from there. So this thing only had like one film. Something tells me that they were planning on introducing the Wolfman, they're introducing the Invisible Man, and yeah, that's what we're doing the 2-for-1 on, Wolfman and Invisible Man today. The Invisible Man film is from 2020, but I'll get to that. Wolfman film is very recent. I'll get started on the Wolfman film, but if this was ever meant to be part of a bigger story, it certainly doesn't feel like it, because Wolfman feels like a very self-contained story. And it is the basic elements of the story are there, which starts out with this character as a child encountering the Wolfman in the forest, and he and his father narrowly escaping this thing. And then cut to 30 years later, where the son is all grown up and discovers that his father, who has been declared missing, has finally been declared dead, and they send him the keys to his old childhood home, this cabin in the woods. So, like any horror movies, it descends to the cabin in the woods, and he takes his wife and his daughter there, and this guy has a really good a good loving relationship with his daughter, and I actually like the way this film really approaches that. He doesn't really have a good loving relationship with his wife. They're kind of at odds with each other, and he's kind of hoping he can revive his family through this little trip. Well, they definitely get revived all right, because if you know anything about horror movies, the time where these characters try and revive their marriage usually ends up kind of shooting it in the head, doesn't it? Anyway, so, well, they go there, and almost immediately they are attacked by the Wolfman. Now, the main character of this film gets scratched by the Wolfman, and if you know anything about Wolfman legends, or werewolf legends, or lycanthrope legends, if you are scratched or bit by the werewolf, or whatever, anything, that means you're going to become that. That is the usual thing. So the typical lore is there, and what's different about this film is you actually kind of see the POV transformation from this loving father into this monster, and they do it very subtly. For example, like there's a scene where he just sort of hears noises, like the sound of drum beats, and then you look and and then he goes into a certain room and there's just a spider crawling up the wall. Big old spider too. So you see it subtly happen. Like for some reason, like his voice, or they kind of like, he's talking to his wife, but his wife doesn't answer. Then we sort of see from the wife's point of view that he's really spouting gibberish and growling, because he's slowly becoming into the Wolfman. And there's also this strange aspect of how they show sight, and how as he's becoming a Wolfman, his vision becomes very strange. Like you can kind of see in the dark and stuff like that, or colors start to become really change. Which it's a very interesting way of telling the story. It's not super effective. I really feel like this is one of those films that I felt could have been a real deeper movie, but kind of doesn't really embrace that. One thing it doesn't embrace is the usual werewolf lore of shooting with a silver bullet. That seems to be something that shows up in a lot of these werewolf movies. It's always the silver bullet. And in this case, I actually think I might as well get to spoilers, even though I'm only at the halfway mark for this film. But yeah, I think they take him out with just a regular gun, and which I kind of thought, like, are there no silver bullets in there? Now, it could be that maybe that when this film was in the Dark Universe phase, that maybe they were going to bring back the Wolfman. It's a way to do it. As it is, I really feel like if you're trying to have an epic connected universe, Wolfman would not be a good place to start. This would be like a film like, say, I don't know, like Thor or something like that. I never really thought the first Thor movie was all really that good, but it does introduce the character to audiences, which is the purpose of all those original Marvel movies. Some were good, like Iron Man. Some were kind of and yeah, they can mix them together. And so Wolfman is an okay film, and you should watch it if you like horror films. The one I would recommend more is The Invisible Man, done by the same director in 2020. And I didn't realize this film was that old. I actually kind of went like, and it came out in 2020. So when was it in theaters? I have no idea. I have to say that this film is a lot better. I like how it's played out. It starts out with a woman who's played by Elizabeth Moss, who has a husband who's incredibly rich, but the husband is very manipulative and abusive of her. So she tries to flee and even drugs him to the point of, and then she goes to, she manages with her sister to escape. And then it's discovered later that the husband has committed suicide. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be the case that the husband has committed suicide, because Elizabeth Moss's character just feels like there's just this invisible presence in where she's living now. And it's confirmed. This is one of those films that could have really just focused on the main character's idea that maybe it's all paranoia. And I really felt like this really should have been that, because when this film is discussing that idea, it is the most interesting. But the fact is that later on, there's a really good scene where when she discovers that the Invisible Man is in her home, she takes a can of paint and pours it over him, and there's kind of this blotch there, and they play this, and there's this, it's one of the greatest jump scares I've ever seen, honestly. It's really done well. And this is one of those films where it gets very neat, very fast, but at the same time, because of the psychological implications of this film that I thought were a lot better than just, say, a bunch of special effects, that kind of takes the film down a bit. But I do like the effect of because it's discovered that the husband did develop this suit that renders him invisible. And the husband and his brother are sort of using it. And what I think is kind of interesting about this film, and I'm going to sort of get to spoilers, they eventually do bring down the Invisible Man, but it turns out to be the husband's brother. And then when she goes to confront her husband, who has been found alive, because apparently this husband's brother apparently buried him in the basement and called it a suicide. So yeah, the husband was alive this whole time. The husband denies it completely. And here's the thing, he might not be guilty of this. He might be a piece of trash and was terrible to her, but it might have been the woman's perception of this. It isn't really known, and there isn't really a very clear thing going on here. But yeah, so at the end, I believe that Elizabeth Moss's character kills this guy, and essentially there's a cop who's good friends with Elizabeth Moss, who kind of saw this happen and just sort of looks the other way. So I'm not really certain what the takeaway of this film is, other than the fact that I think I want to see it again because I really do like the suspense of this film. I think it is a really good one and I would recommend. And I don't know if it was also part of this Dark Universe thing, because the Invisible Man is say, one of those universal monster sort of things, but points. I have to say, this is quite a really good film. So yeah, you can watch both of these, done by the same director. Think of them as, hey, maybe they do take place in the same universe. We don't know.